Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello, and welcome to Authors on Mission podcast, the podcast committed to diving into the strategies and insights of established experts who've achieved success while writing a book about it. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission, and our mission is to empower you with the knowledge and confidence to bring your imagination into the written word. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome teZa Lord, a multifaceted author, artist, and spiritual guide whose life story reads like an adventure novel itself. teZa is the author of The Bridge Tender and also part of her Power of Oneness series. So we're going to dive in all about that book and all of her experiences, and I'm just excited to learn more. So without further ado, welcome to our show.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Danielle.
Thank you so much for joining us. I come here today with a beautiful copy of The Bridge Tender for everybody listening today. An amazing, beautifully drawn book. And you most likely drew this whole cover, didn't you? Designed it yourself?
It's painted. It's not drawn. Yeah.
I love it. And,
Yeah.
the real cool
I designed it. Yeah. So it's more than just a painting. It's the image or the book cover is so important. That's the first thing somebody sees usually if they're rolling through a million other books.
Yeah. And, as we do dive more into it, it just includes all these other sketches too. It's just, it catches the eye. It keeps you grounded in what we're saying as well. And it's just beautiful to know too. And I know these are all your original art pieces as well. So just another amazing element of this book. Before we dive into that too much, though, I'd love to begin by just asking a little bit more about who you are and what led you to writing your first book.
Who am I? Well, I am who I am. Yosemite Sam says, well, I've had many different incarnations in my life. I've done a lot of traveling, a lot of adventuring, and I never wanted a career. I never wanted a family, but I have all those things inadvertently. I never went for them. I really wanted to just have adventures. So early on in life, I went sailing in the Caribbean, and I stayed there for at least a decade. I had so much fun and doing lots of work and doing inter-island shipping of fruits and vegetables. I know a lot about plants. I studied art. I was a botanical illustrator. I work with plants as a designer, and I paint plants and I think plants. And I really think that the planet is, a living entity also. So my whole world has been geared around nature, pursuing nature and adventuring with nature. That's who I am.
I can see how that resonates in your writing as well. Being that this book here is also about you got the bridge, at least metaphor, the light keeper. So you got the water element, which I can see kind of similar to maybe the sailing you mentioned and all of that. So really cool stuff. I can just see how it applies to the book.
And it's really about consciousness more than all those other things you mentioned. It's about hey, wake up, everybody. I'm shouting that because really it's time for everybody to up their game, so to speak, and really get with the fact that we need to help the planet, not just help ourselves, but we start by helping ourselves, and then we can help the planet, because the 21st century is here. And I believe that the best way of being a spiritual person in the 21st century is to be environmentally conscious. That's the main thing. Politics will not do it. The uplifting of our consciousness will do it, will help what's, kind of a dangerous situation that we're in with the planet as far as the environment and toxicity and all that.
Understood. Yeah, I know I was making a little bit of a stretch there. I was trying to just connect it to the book itself, right? And I think bridge, the first thing you think of is like a bridge over water or something, but I know exactly what you mean. In fact, the very prologue of this book is each and every one of you has me inside yourself, right? So just that in itself is that cosmic consciousness that you deliver in the book.
We all have the answers and we all have the key, and all of us have superpowers. We just got to do it and use it.
Right, right. So this also it blends this idea of, that spirituality, but also the environmental concerns like you mentioned before. So, how did you interrelate these together as you were writing and kind of include both the fiction and the real world challenges together?
It's interesting. I've just been reading a lot about C.S. Lewis. If you know who he is, he wrote the Narnia
Mhm.
Chronicle, and he was also at one point in his life an atheist, and then he had an awakening, and he became a Christian. And so most of his writing is related to like how that transformation happened. And he was forced to write the Narnia Chronicles because he just couldn't express what he wanted to with all the nonfiction books that he put out. And he was a historian, and his specialty was medieval literature and Renaissance. And, he was really a scholar. He was a professor at Oxford, along with Tolkien, who wrote the great Lord of the Rings. But I found in my writing, because my previous books were nonfiction, I just found that there are some things you have to go to fiction for. And that's the magical side of life. And the magical side is when we're talking about consciousness that is not just based upon, what you see is what you got. It's really dealing with energy and the unseen forces that are abundant in our existence. And so the Narnia Chronicles, obviously goes heavily into that. And my book is not so heavily into the fantasy, but it's totally into the magic that each one of us has access to. And I found that nonfiction just could not express that. You would be a false writer if you tried to say that in a nonfiction book, because you can't prove it. You can't put energy like, our own private energy or power of creation. You can't put that under a microscope and dissect it. You have to believe in it.
Right, yeah, and I guess that's a whole nother element of your book too, is like that question for humanity, right? One of the chapters I was reading here, it kind of like ended with, can she do it? Can we do it? It kind of just like extends the question, like connecting it to everybody as a whole, right? Not just the characters in the book, which is, something really cool to do, like making it really relevant to your readers.
Yeah, I think
Call to action.
every good book is autobiographical. Obviously, it's just like every wonderful painting is, they say there's elements of the artist in there, but you have to look at our own lives, our own individual bodies as like a microcosm of the bigger picture. And it's just like all our cells are interconnected. Everything in life is interconnected out there. And so it happens right within our own bodies, So if we think good thoughts, we're going to probably have really healthy cells all throughout our bodies. And it's like that with the bridge tender, to encourage people to really tune into the magical thinking that is possible if we just believe it or if we just want it.
Right, exactly. And I guess I can see how throughout the book you work to bring that out of your readers a little bit, like almost like, you're bridging between worlds in the book itself, but maybe also bridging, opening up a reader's mind through that bridge to and showing them the path, I guess you could say. Is that correct?
But sometimes we have to go to dark places to get to the light. I think that that's what's happening in our society today. We really have to realize there is a darkness to being human, and those who reject it and say, oh no, we want everything to be just perfect. Well, the earth is not like that. This is not, paradise. It can be paradise if we make it so. I believe that I've created paradise where I live. I have a nice quiet retreat. Oh, it's so nice to have a quiet place from this crazy world. But we get to create the lives that we want. And if we don't like the ones we have the power to change. If we just say, oh, okay, I'm going to do some changing. And then we whip out our superpowers and we focus on one thing after the next and we change, just like the bridge tender does.
Right, exactly. And, kind of going into more about, the actual context of the bridge tender. I'm sure our listeners are actually, a little bit curious about, these characters and what's going on, right? So, for example, when I was reading it, Thea Bowman's character was all about mirroring that, humanity's environmental frustration that you were just mentioning. I'm wondering, is any of that kind of autobiographical on your part? Was there
Yeah.
any personal experiences that you embedded in that?
Well, Absolutely. But she's not me. She's an amalgam of many, many people I know. First of all, teZa is the main character, and she is not a nice person at the beginning. She's definitely mixed up and a drug addict and a party person and just kind of drifting along. And so she's in her shadow. She's really not a very happy person, and she has not awakened. So, you can't start a story off about encouraging people to awaken by just starting off with somebody who's brilliantly enlightened, because that's kind of intimidating. We all have to go through our lessons, and some of them are really difficult. And so teZa has some really difficult stuff to learn, selfishly and narcissistically, and not pretty at all at the beginning of the book. But fortunately, she pays attention when it's time for her to make a shift, and she doesn't wallow around in the muck too long. And I would say, like, halfway through the book, we start getting into her believing in herself, which is a manifestation of the way the world is. I mean, we can believe and have hope in this world rather than say, oh, everything is dreadful, everything is going to ruin. It's not. There's just as many wonderful things happening if we just focus on them.
Right. Would you say that's one of the most challenging things to have expressed in there, the idea that, you do need to recognize that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really addicted to being mopers or whiners, because everybody's addicted to their screens. Everybody's become a professional opinion person. Everybody's a pundit. Everybody, wants to put in their 2 cents because this is the way our world is. Nothing wrong with that, except why is everybody trying to outdo one another with negativity? I just see a lot of negativity, even in like movies, current movies or TV shows. I mean, my husband and I made a feature film, and we're very much interested in cinema, and like it's really hard to find a current American production that's uplifting. I mean, most of it is pretty down energy, deadbeat and disrespectful and not encouraging at all about the higher vibrations that are available. Whereas we like to see things from the BBC or even Europe. All over Europe, they're investigating, really interesting ways of portraying modern life without so much focus on the negative.
Yeah, and I can see how you relate that in this book too, because when I was reading it, I realized, obviously our character has an internal battle between destructive and healing. So I guess that, mirrors, like you were just saying. A particular line that I wrote down here in my little notes here is, she's realizing inside her a battle between good and evil is raging. Can she hear the higher call of transformation? Can she change? Will she embrace the unseen dimension? So, like, I think that line in particular just kind of shows us exactly, like, the goal that you should be asking yourself too, perhaps.
Yeah, every single one of us. I mean, I don't think that any of us get off this planet without going through those questions. Like, begins with puberty. We start asking, like, well, what's this all about? Like, who am I? I mean, like, when we have the awakening of our personality, which is, they say it's around 7, the age of reason. I mean, I remember distinctly, like, wow, what is it like? What is being alive all about? And the more mature we are, we get to choose how to focus that consciousness that we have, this wonderful gift of being human. It's a different kind of consciousness than the jungle animals have, or the hummingbirds have, or the snakes, or the polar bears. We're all animals. Some people forget that we are animals, and we have evolved our consciousness to make wonderful choices, like communication. That's a big one. There's no other animals that can sit down and have a conversation or write books. How marvelous is that? So, and some people just don't realize that all those choices add up. Every single choice we make is either making us a happier person or keeping us in the fear factor.
Right. Yeah, of course. So, transitioning a little bit into the writing process for this, one thing I definitely want to touch upon before we even do anything else is all these illustrations, which, I mentioned before and I flipped up, but, there's just some beautifully detailed drawings of flowers and natural scenes. Like, if you're, can see the screen right now, everybody, we've got many different kinds
You
here.
can see
So,
it.
I'm wondering, what inspired you to include these specific ones, right? I mean, so many options you could have drawn pictures of and included in the text. What led to that decision?
Well, I'm a whole brain person. I visual and I'm also literate. I mean, a lot of artists say, "Oh, I can't even manage a computer." But I have trained myself to be using both sides of my brain. And I love visual and I love scientific. And so when it comes to illustrations, like those are things that you operate from just gut feelings.
Mhm.
Like whether you're trying to decide which way a character goes or which way a story goes or what illustration would be important to include, all those things you have to train. You have to trust your gut. And so you start getting these things called inspiration. It's almost like somebody's whispering inside of you saying, "Oh man, I really want to see that drawing of the dolphins when she calls the dolphins," just like with her mind. That's one of the first illustrations where she's in the ocean and she's just kind of testing to see her powers. And she starts sending out this message, and one dolphin appears, and pretty soon a whole herd, a pod appears, and that's where the illustration is she's there playing with this bunch of dolphins. And so I'm probably confusing with another book that I wasn't thinking about, the Bridge Tender, but I illustrate all my books. I illustrate all of them, and all of them are this gut instinct about where that was Hybrid Vigor. That was the book that was about animals
Okay.
and about choosing to go higher. So I always have 12 illustrations in all of my books, nonfiction and fiction, so that if anybody ever wanted to make a calendar, I'd have 12
Oh,
illustrations.
how clever.
That's a magic number. So some of the reasons I do the illustrations are practical ones. Like I'll look at the manuscript and I'll say, "Oh, you want to see an illustration every so often so you don't just fall asleep. So, oh, there's a big gap here. That would be a cool place to have an illustration." So you see, oh, well, what's the subject matter? Or sometimes I have a really cool drawing that relates to the story and I just like tuck it in there. So there's no formula. It's just like the creative process. And when it's alive and well, it's just percolating, it's just cooking, it's just fitting in, everything just fits.
Yeah, I mean, I like that you said that it is part of just like the writing process, right? It just comes naturally and and then you have to kind of find a process later on perhaps to revise it, maybe select only a few. I mean, out of all the ideas, 12 is actually a pretty small number considering, how many things you could have illustrated, right? So it's all, yeah, I guess there's another layer of that too, right? It's all instinctual, but then you might have to do a little bit of refining, right? Or
Yeah, and I remember, do you know the book called The Book Thief?
yes, yes.
So I love the illustrations in that book. They were very random and they were very weird. And it was almost like, huh?
Yeah, like why that?
Yeah, it's like, what has this got to do with? Oh, okay, I see that. It's almost like calligraphy. And yeah, I just really believe that there is no set rule anymore about anything. I mean, it's just like when I was a younger person, we had to not wear white after Labor Day, right? Or you had a certain hem length because of the fashion of mavens saying that's the hem length. Now it's like anybody can wear anything they want or nothing. And you can wear white in the middle of winter and you can wear a mini skirt and or full length. Doesn't matter. I just love the fact that creativity has become so much a part of modern life that it's really at random, and it's up to your instinct and your connection with that creative juice.
Understood. I get that. There really is no set rules, especially when you come to writing and, writing process and editing. I mean, I do agree you have to follow certain conventions, of course, like grammar, but, you know, then again, if you're choosing a semicolon over an M dash or a comma, like, is that really like the end all
Yeah.
be all, right? It's more so what's getting the idea across.
Yeah. Well, you have to know the basics. It's just like with being an artist. You have to know how to put the bones together if you want to draw the human figure. Because I know myself, I tried to draw the human figure before I studied anatomy, and it was a mess. Everything looked, like all disconnected. And to understand what is happening under the skin, where the bones and the muscles are, you have to just do some studying and hopefully take maybe a few classes. And so the same thing with writing, nothing worse than reading a book where the grammar is bad, and once you get the grammar thing under your belt, then you can have a character who speaks really poorly, and right away, wow, that poor person just ain't got it. They weren't educated. But you're trying to put it in a story where if everybody talked like that, it would just be so annoying. And colloquialisms are really tricky. You have to be careful when people are talking slang or people are talking in a dialect, and you have to be careful with that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point to raise too. There's a balance then, like certain stylistic choices you can make, but then others you do need to be consistent and professional. And, that's the only way your readers are going to understand what you're saying, or, credibility, or enjoying the book itself even, right? So all incredible things to think about. And so if you're listening today, take that to heart as well.
Right. Like one of my characters in The Bridge Tender is a West Indian dude. He's a famous artist in New York City, and his name is Junkyard Trini. But he's just an incredible character, and he speaks in Calypso. And even though he's a sophisticated, really successful artist in New York City, he still has his Calypso talk. And so you have to be able to use that in certain places and not make it seem idiotic, because he's not an idiot. He's an absolute successful, really well-regarded artist.
Right, exactly. And, it's all things to consider as we go about our processes too. One thing I'm curious about, though, you mentioned to me earlier on that you're very involved in yoga and, healing practices like that. Does that play a part in your writing process as well?
Oh, well, sure. So, okay, Kali is another of the main characters. Kali, who is the goddess Kali. She's not a human. She's a mythological figure, a goddess. And that is a very yogic thing. I am not just a person who goes to a yoga class. I am what is known as a yogini. Yoginis are women, and I always say yoginis wear bikinis. A woman is a yogini and a male is a yogi. And since teenage years, I have been involved in the yoga world because it saved my life. And so first you start with postures. Everybody knows about those funny postures everybody does. And then you start going deeper and deeper into what yoga is really about. And it's really about meditation. And even when you're doing the postures, it's very meditative. It's really using your body as the temple of your life. And so the book, teZa, finally becomes humble enough out of her narcissistic addiction era where she can approach her body like a temple. And then Kali comes in to be one of her guides. And that's the magic. That's the magic that is real for teZa, because it's not just made up stuff. It's actually it's not delusional. It's like what your belief system is, and her belief system became open to working with the magical forces. And so Kali, who was just like a mythological figure at the beginning of the book, she actually starts appearing and doing some shocking things and getting teZa's attention big time.
Right. And one thing that stood out to me when you were saying that is the idea, of translating belief systems, right? So, being that this is a really, spiritual concept, Have you ever faced any challenges in translating it to like a broad audience, making it accessible narrative fiction? Or would you say it's kind of just flows and comes
I
out?
think everybody is really hungry for the truth. And my own personal feeling is that a lot of people in this day and age, right here, right now, are really upset. And if they don't have a belief system in the magical realm, and I'm not just talking about a religion, going to church, I'm talking about really understanding how humans have a built-in spirituality, and we are spiritual beings having a human experience. It sounds so corny, but when we really are open to those magical forces, it becomes our reality. And I think that a book like The Bridge Tender makes that accessible to people. It's almost like, instead of a how-to, reading a story about somebody who was so miserably lost, and yet they found comfort in this magical realm of working with the energy that is all around us all the time, which could be called spirituality, you know?
Yeah, okay, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's true, some books, touch upon concepts that people just don't know about or they're not, unsure about. But when the way you explained it just now makes it clear that it is accessible to many different people for that reason.
Right. I mean, I've known people who just don't get that concept until the end of their life, and then they feel like, wow, I really missed the boat. But you don't have to be like that anymore, because it is becoming so accessible for people to have a spiritual connection in life, because our tribes are expanding. I'm talking about the spiritual tribes. We have penetrated all different walks of life. And it is no longer just a freak thing that somebody is spiritually inclined. You meet people like that everywhere, in the smallest little town, in the grocery store, crossing the street. It's amazing. Everybody really has become a lot more relaxed about what this human experience is all about. And so novels like this, I love. I wish everybody wrote in. It actually is magical realism. A lot of people prefer historical fiction or romance or something like that. I'm not that person. I really like to have stories that make me feel empowered, to make me feel proud to be a human, and to know that other characters in books have explored this opportunity, so I can too, in little ways.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of little ways, you made this Power of Oneness into a series, right? Like delivering the information a little bit at a time, right? So my curious question is, how has the writing process evolved from the first to the most recent? Or would you say they mainly keep the same styles?
No, I don't think so. I think every writer evolves. And I've been told by many people that The Bridge Tender, which is fiction, is really so much more exciting for people to read, because you just feel like at liberty to explore things with fiction. With nonfiction, you have to mind your P's and Q's. And yes, you can be creative, especially with nonfiction narrative, which is my style. And, I have a lot of dialogue. I have a lot of characters. I have a lot of interesting little vignettes. So I think my nonfiction is pretty straightforward fun. It's not like how-to stuff. Step 1, step 2, do this, seven habits to be a highly effective person. No, it's more like fun explorations of the themes that I've picked, whether it's teaching girls how to be empowered who are in prison, and that's a yoga and meditative approach to life. That's called In the Eye. And then I explore family life, because I had the privilege of being a step parent to my husband's kids, and really dedicated myself to, working with a dysfunctional family to begin with and healing it with love. And then the third one was the animal one that I mentioned earlier, the hybrid vigor, which is really exploring the possibility of changing right midstream in life from Homo sapiens. We're all thinking we're so knowledgeable, because that's what it means, thinking humans, into Homo spiritus, which is using our superpowers and being more spiritual. And then I wrote the fiction book. So the evolution was strong, going to strong statements, being freer, and the book that I'm working on now, which is going to be a combination of nonfiction and fiction. I mean, I don't know if that's called faction or what, but it is. It's kind of an exploration of things that have happened to me, but with a lot of fictional things put in there. And so everything evolves depending on what time of your life you're working on something. I don't want to go back ever and look at any of the books I've already published. They're a done deal. You know, I've never even reread any of my books.
Oh, not even reread them. That's
no, onward to the next project. No, once they're done, they're done. They're like babies, you know, you give them to the world. I mean, I can read excerpts for occasions, but
cross-reference it when you have to, maybe for like another project. You know, I understand what you're getting at, but you don't even have the time probably to sit down and just read the whole thing sometimes, unless you really set some time aside, I'm sure.
Well, I don't have time to reread any of my books.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if someday if I'm paralyzed or something, I don't have any.
Well, let's hope not. I hope that's not
like sitting somewhere, and I'll say, okay, I'll reread those books. I have so, and we're getting ready for a big trip. We do a lot of traveling, and we explore. We go to Patagonia, and now we're making a big river trip up the Intercoastal Waterway. My husband love to go off on adventures still.
So that's really cool, to be honest. I like to travel as well, but I'm sure that yours are a lot more like adventure based. It's really cool that you're going to be going in those international waters. So it sounds like you have that as an exciting thing on the horizon for you, but you also did mention something else that's really exciting on the horizon, which is the next book that's coming out. You told me it was on the final round of editing, which is really cool to know. I do want to talk a little bit about that book in particular, but you know, in terms of the editing that you mentioned, can you share some insights about your revision process and how you know when a manuscript is ready for publication? We talked a little bit about this before, but perhaps specific to this book that you're writing now. How did you know it's only one final stage left?
Well, okay, I'm calling it the final edit because, you know, there's only so much editing you can do. I mean, I think that there's a word for it in business. They call it analysis paralysis. I mean, people who edit, you know, right. They might not trust their gut. But with me, when I do what I call the final edit, it's slash and burn. Anything doesn't feel right in my gut, it's out. If a little voice says, that is boring, out, it's out. It's not just like to be rewritten. Like whole pages, whole chapters, whole characters can be slashed. And on the other hand, I could, in the final edit, I could be saying, but wait, I forgot to really bridge this one section and make it reasonable so people can jump there with me. So those things come out very strongly. And also the final edit is when I read it aloud.
Okay.
But that's when I'm ready to go to print, really. But the final edit, which I'm at right now, is going to be slash and burn, you know, just really
get rid of all that unnecessary content, right?
Because, you know, I've got enough material for 3 books, and I'm not sure if it's going to be 3 books or 1. I have to decide that. It's gotten to be a really long story because it's a long period of time, and so it might be a trilogy. So I'm going to decide that as I go through the final editing, or it might be just one really compact book and I slash and burn. But you know what I mean? As an editor, you probably feel that it's almost like a little tickle in your gut saying that just doesn't feel right.
Right. So, you know, there's at least something to be done about it.
Right. It could be a redundancy, for instance. Wait, we don't need to see that over again. That's a really big one. Redundancy is.
Oh yeah. People like to go on, and you know, the longer you talk, the more naturally you're going to be circling back to the same topic. You know, where it all comes from. Yeah. So, What would be the process of determining if you're going to keep it as a large book or 3 smaller books? What would be some of those factors to make that decision?
Right. Well, I've been thinking about that for this book has,
Maybe that's a tricky question for you.
yeah. Like I said, I have a lot of wordage, a lot of pages, but I have not really had the time because I've been so busy publishing other books. So now I'm really going to have to sit down and see how much of it is good writing, because I really like the fact that, a wonderful sentence to shine, not just an idea of a book, but every sentence should shine as much as it can possibly. And sometimes I just feel that, that's a tricky question. It's so much a gut thing, the gut tells you, sometimes a dream will tell you. I pay attention to the voices I get from my dreams and instincts, and in the process of doing yoga every day, I have a lot of at least 20 minutes of really quiet time where I'm just doing poses and breathing. And sometimes an idea will pop up. And sometimes I've had direction from my inner self. For instance, as I get into the editing process, this inner voice could say, you know what, this really needs to be a trilogy. And if that voice comes out that strong while I'm actually having my quiet time and not just analyzing it, I'll go with it because I trust my gut. I really do.
That's perfect actionable advice too, right? Kind of knowing the right time to say, okay, like, no, I just got to trust myself and not just keep writing and writing and editing and editing.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not a logical thing. It's not something you can think out, like, oh, I have X amount of words, and if I just divide it by 3, it's not about that. It's really about the energy that you're trying to transmit with a book. And I narrate all my books too. I've spoken them, made audiobooks out of them, and I think it's really important that they be as entertaining as possible.
Right.
They're interesting and not just like not just an exploration of a subject, but people actually get excited about them. It's almost like you're creating a little movie with your narration. You can do that with a good narration.
Yeah, definitely. And this just makes me more excited for the next book, especially because I loved what I've read so far of this one. So, first off, when can people be expecting this out on the shelves? And also, where can they find it? How can they get in touch with you if they have any questions about the writing or the writing process?
No, I'm definitely available through my website, tezalord.com. And, everybody can write me there. But I really think that it's going to be at least a year for the new book. Yeah.
Okay. Well, never too early for people to follow along and get some updates and be excited for it.
Yeah.
And
I do social media, but I don't usually talk about the work because that bursts the bubble. I keep it really kind of close to my heart. I don't talk about it too much.
Okay, well, we'll keep that in mind. But either way, guys, look forward to that release. And in the meantime, pick up The Bridge Tender. Amazing cover, amazing art, amazing content, all in all. So I'm wondering now, do you have any other tips, tricks that you'd like to give our listeners today? Any bits of homework for them to try as the podcast ends up?
Well, for writers, I just think it's really important to express the most deepest and the most shocking or the most peaceful and quiet, the things that are really the most meaningful to you. Mm-hmm. It may not fit in with what the culture is expecting, but if it's true for you, then it's really worth your time to explore writing about.
Okay, definitely. So ask yourself, is it worth it to me, right? Figure out what that means.
Yeah. It's not something about like, oh, I see the trend is about mystery or historical, so I better go that way. If somebody has an urgency to write about something as far-fetched as something nobody has even heard about, just go for it.
Yeah, definitely. I love that so much. Just another positive message that you've shared with us today throughout the podcast. We kind of began by talking about that, positivity element, and here we are now circling back to it. So I appreciate that. That's something good for us all to hone in on as we continue writing. I mean, it kind of goes with your motto, right? Love is the weapon of mass illumination. So, gotta have that love and that positivity in everything you do.
Yeah, you said that so quickly, but I'm going to say it again really slowly. Love is the weapon of mass illumination. And like a lot of people say, what? Love is a weapon? Yeah, man. If you're using love, which is in the expansive form, which is the opposite of fear, love is really this energy that can be transmitted. It's not just an action verb. It's not, oh, I love you, but it's a noun thing. I mean, we can all live in the state of love instead of fear or confusion or anger or whining.
I love that. I think that's the perfect way to kind of wrap things up today. Everybody listening, we had an amazing conversation where we found out a little bit more about the bridge tender. We learned the concepts behind it, some writing strategies, and also we have another book to look out for in the horizon. Again, thank you so much for joining me on my show. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I'm excited to finish up the rest of this guy and, really dive into this world and see about, making my own bridges in life. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, remember that becoming an expert in your field isn't just about mastering techniques or accumulating knowledge. It's about finding that unique intersection between, your lived experiences and the message that you're called to share with the world. So you can find these books on the links that we're going to put into the description box of this podcast. And, just thank you for joining us today on the Authors on Mission podcast. Please remember to keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring. We'll see you next time. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.